Drew and Jaco, congratulations on the film.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah,
You guys are in
appreciate it.
Trieste right now?
Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
How's the festival going?
it's I've been here longer than Drew. I think you only arrived like yesterday,
Yeah,
Drew.
I got in I
Uh,
got in last night, so it's still pretty new for me. I'm kind of getting my bearings, but
So let's jump in. I got to watch the film last night. Super interesting. I think there's a lot to discuss here. Jaco, let's start with you. I'd love to hear a little bit of you sort of setting the scene of the film, but also describing the genesis of the project and what drew you to it and how you got involved.
I mean, maybe in terms of Genesis, Drew should maybe where it came from. I kind of got attached after reading the first draft of the script. So I was not really part of the beginning process of that, but they on the back of Gaia, they contacted me. We had some meetings, and they sent me the script. I read it. And there was something really interesting to me about the subject matter, the thematics in it, that felt that I would like to pursue this, further. Especially ideas around language and communication. Obviously, um, there's also something about the two location. It's funny that my previous two films, one has a cabin and a forest, basically, and then the second one was just one location. So I don't know if it's because of my theater background that I find these kind of uh, quite restrictions in terms of work challenging, and trying to find ways of making it cinematic, I guess. So these kind of stuff that I was kind of attracted to the project in the beginning. Um, then obviously, we a lot of back and forth, and how long projects take to get off the ground. Um, And then eventually we shot in Syracuse, up in upstate New York. Um, I assume it was because of the tax rebate there. Um, and yeah, so it was quite, yeah, it was for me a different kind of project because I don't have the usual kind of um, collaborators that I normally collaborate with beside me, like DP or production designer or wardrobe and stuff. So it was kind of challenging in that way to kind of step into a totally new kind of blank canvas and meeting people over Zoom and then try and wade yourself through it. But I must say, between the production designer and the DP, we really connected when we were in prep in Syracuse, and so a lot of the energy and aesthetic and the way the film turned out was in that kind of pre-production stage in upstate New York.
Drew, why don't you, you're both the star and a producer. Talk about how it evolved for you, how you got involved.
yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I've always been deeply motivated and I gravitate towards science fiction in a weird way. I think I always have, even since I was very young. Star Wars was my mountaintop. That was the movie that opened my eyes to the world of film and television. And I was very, very young when I first saw it. And so I always kind of liked telling stories in that space, and I liked watching movies in that space because there's so much world building that you can do, and there's a lot of kind of imagination that you can play with. And so I always wanted to tell a story in that space, and I've been fascinated with the idea of um, I think like how humans communicate with each other, and how we talk, and how honest we are with each other, and kind of like what is this thing that we call truth, and is it fundamental, and or is it subjective, is it objective, and just kind of playing with ideas like that, and um, how like language barriers can create such different or such difficult kind of barriers and or bridges to what communication is. And so, Sunil and I, my producing partner, just kind of were really fascinated by the idea of that and like what psychology is for each individual person. And so we wanted to kind of see if we could tell a story that was very grounded and also had these kind of ethereal aspects to it. And we just kind of played around with ideas and brought Anjali on to kind of develop this script with us and kind of punch the script forward and kind of take our ideas and put it on page. And I think as soon as we did, we knew we kind of had something special, something fun, because it's so relevant to today, but it's also not just that. It's, Jaco and I have talked about this in depth, that there's so much going on with the media and what you see and what you hear, and how it just feels like you don't know what to believe anymore, and how there's an energy to it all. And so we basically just had this idea, this great idea in this script, and knew we wanted to tell it, but we didn't know who would be, the person to be able to get that story told in the manner that we wanted it told. And obviously, I've said this many times, he's probably sick of hearing it, but as soon as Sunil and I watched Gaia, and we breathing in and some of Jaco's stuff, we just knew that, like, okay, we would be so lucky if this guy, like, let's reach out to this guy and see if he wants to tell this story, see if he wants to kind of put his stamp on it. And so thankfully for us, we did. We reached out to Jaco, and he was gracious enough to bless us with his presence and his talent. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. I think we had something like, very minute and just precious. And I think when he came on, it just became something else entirely. We started getting, a lot of traction, a lot of interest. And that's kind of how it started.
The film plays a lot with the idea of truth, as you say. I think one of the lines is, there is no truth anymore. There's this tension of like, what's really real, what's happening, what's not happening. How did you, Jaco, why don't you speak a little bit about how, you approach getting all these ideas into the script while still moving the story forward?
Look, I mean, first of all, there's the basis of the script, which was there in terms of, the language that's been said. Then there's also kind of what is not being said. Well, I just want to start maybe with that. Having Andrew McCarthy come on board was really a blessing, because I think he brings such a weight and a cerebral kind of quality to Jim, the character. There is something also in the approach that, it's kind of set up in the beginning as the protagonist and antagonist, but those lines also becomes a bit blurry towards the end, which was kind of intentional in some way. I had a lot of images in mind, obviously how, in terms of production design and world building. But for me, the crux of the argument, or the Madden room scene, or where most of the movie takes place, I actually followed what I would normally do in theaters, that I would block a scene which made sense in terms of motivation and movement for the characters, and then adapted the camera towards capturing that instead of the other way around, where some stuff was kind of storyboarded, or even with a DP in my head, or how we would do that. That was kind of actually left open. And I think for me, the approach was, especially for that section, is that it's performance first, above all else. That the chemistry between the characters, because they basically, if you don't buy into the two of them, you totally lose your audience. Or you will lose your audience. We actually didn't rehearse. Me and Drew rehearsed, and some of the other stuff, but with Andrew, doesn't like to rehearse in a way. So, and I think that is also something that is quite magical, to kind of give them a strong structure that they can work within, but then really kind of react off each other, which I think really kind of helped to hopefully authentic kind of response and performances. Drew had his world building and his character and his arc, and Andrew had his, and it's almost like setting these two against each other. And that authenticity of responding and reacting to what the other person brought, I think, kept things fresh and hopefully, you know, keeps the audience kind of on edge. So that was kind of my approach with the middle section, or the majority of the very kind of dialogue heavy scenes. Don't know if that really answers your question.
Yes. Drew, it is kind of essentially a two-hander with you and Andrew. And I like what Jaco said about this kind of two alternative worlds being built at the same time. Um, yeah, let's hear from you about that experience of these long, intense scenes between you and Andrew. And I definitely want to hear about the fact that there was little rehearsal or no rehearsal. That sounds like quite a challenge from an actor's point of view.
um, yeah, well, to touch, I think, a little bit on the scenes with Andrew. He he made it. I think it's always interesting when you start a project, because you don't know anybody. Most of the time, you don't know anyone, and you don't know what their process is, and how serious they take it, or what they're bringing to the scenes and stuff. So you just kind of go in with an open mind, and you know where you're at, and for me, like, Jaco and I had a lot of conversations on not getting too in depth on the lie that might be playing within a lie that's playing within a lie that's playing within a truth. So let's kind of let's simplify it, and I think that helped me a lot, kind of just ground where I needed to be in each moment. And so when those scenes do kind of like play out, and like we said, they're dialogue heavy, and we're in those locations, it was easier for me to kind of like hone in on where I was in each moment, and where I was going, and then just kind of being open to whatever Andrew was doing, and whatever he was giving me. There were multiple times throughout where I found myself, you know just being a little sidetracked. Like, as an actor, you think you're kind of going in one way, you think you're open, you're playing whatever, and then um, your scene partner kind of gives you something else entirely, and I think that's kind of what makes it interesting and makes it exciting, is that you kind of have to pivot, and if you can do it in real time, that's the beauty in it. So having someone like Andrew, and then Jaco kind of steer the ship was pivotal, because it kind of made the flow a lot easier for me as an actor, as a performer. So, and as far as rehearsal, we didn't really, we I would bounce ideas off of him, and kind of just send him little things or pictures or inspirations for where I was at, and what I was thinking for Apollo and stuff. But we did some rehearsal with him and I about movement stuff, just because we wanted to make sure that there was like a freedom to exist, because we're in two rooms essentially for the entirety of the film. So we wanted to make sure that there was like a freedom to exist, and to live in these moments, but also not like just keep being in the same seats or positions and stuff. So where does each moment kind of play and live? And so we wanted to kind of like get a feel for a bit of the choreography of it, and kind of help me get like the life of the space out. So I actually found it very, very beneficial. I can see how you don't want to know any of those things, and you kind of want to go about it your own way. But for me to get in, and I remember when we were rehearsing, it was like we would go in and the rooms were barren, right? The sets weren't even done, and so we would just kind of have to look and get an idea of what this might be on the day, and how this might play, and all these things, and how you can have this room and you can make it your own, and how each scene needs to feel claustrophobic in its own way. And I think as the story goes on, we wanted Apollo to just kind of take his power back. And I think as the story
Yeah,
unfolds, you get that.
in a subtle way there is a change of the table changes in a very subtle
Yeah.
way in terms of the blocking and the movement. So that was kind of consciously done. Sorry for interrupting,
No,
Drew.
no, no. That's
But
what
also
I'm
sometimes also within sections, because we were like days on days, shooting like 10, 9, 7, 8 pages a day of dialogue in one space. You start to go a bit crazy. But I think to keep ourselves on track is we know what the broader kind of arc is and what is the lie within the lie and the whole onions. But I think if you start to try and play all those layers, it starts to muddy your performance. Well, that was my kind of take on it. So it's for me almost like, within section and section, this is what's happening. This is this. So for that moment, essentially this is your truth for that section. You have amnesia, you can't remember point. Although you are playing, the character is playing it. But I think just for the performance is to kind of really make it simplistic. And I felt that helped to kind of build these blocks of, layer upon layer of deception, to not always play all those layers, because it just starts to muddy the water, I feel.
That's where I was kind of going with it anyway. So that's yeah, spot on.
Tell us a little bit about working with Andrew, and maybe give us a moment of this very long dance kind of you guys have back and forth on what's happening, what's the truth, if you will, of the story. Talk, maybe pick a moment in that long those long scenes that was toughest for you to play, and why, and kind of how you worked it out with Andrew.
Yeah,
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
I mean, for instance, I'm just thinking of, he tells the story about his daughter in the beginning, and then later the daughter stories about his son. So, and the kind of take on that was, you really have a daughter. This is really happening, and you're real, that he's playing that for real, as if it really exists. So, and I think he really kind of not nailed it or whatever, but he really kind of pulled that off, that you kind of believe him. And I think there's also subtle movement in the score that kind of plays into that emotive kind of quality, to kind of slightly mislead the audience in believing him even more.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, similarly to that, it's when he's kind of going on. I mean, there are those scenes where we're in the room, and things are playing out, and there's a lot in the beginning where for Apollo, he's observing, and he's watching, and he's listening and taking all this stuff in, and we played a lot with the idea of how much I know, how much I don't know, and how far, like Jaco said earlier, that onion layer, how far we're going to take that. And so it was kind of fun when Andrew was doing those scenes, like you just said in the beginning, when he's telling the story about his family, to kind of sit there and play with what that means to Apollo, and what that means to my character, and is there flashes of he's opening up, and are there flashes of he's closing down, and I don't believe you, and I think I can say, why are you telling me this? And like, what I love about working with actors like that is you watch one take, and Jaco, I'm sure, can attest to this, but you watch one take and he's kind of feeling it out, and sensing where his character is at, and then the next one, it's completely different. He's hitting it hard, and he's hitting certain moments really hard, and it makes you react to that. And so certain reactions, I remember seeing that I was like, oh, I don't even remember feeling that in the moment. So it was nice. It was nice. I like those. I enjoy scenes like that, because there's a lot of room to I guess grow, in the moment, and then there's a lot to react to, you know. I remember I once had somebody tell me two people in a room talking is boring, and I thought like that's just odd, you know what I mean? You know, like that's just weird because that's reality and that's life. And so maybe that was their take on it, but I enjoy scenes like that. I think it gives you a lot of room to evolve and things to kind of play with. So I think we had fun with that.
Andrew, in a way, is when after kind of with kind of blocking the section of the day that we would do, there would be kind of a technical flaw, and then me and the DP would sit and see how we kind of going to put this and cover this scene. And then Andrew is always he needs to know exactly what is the setups, that he knows exactly how the whole thing plays out. So he needs to know. And once he knows that, so I would say, well, we're going to do this a two shot, then we're going to follow you there, talking everything through to him. And then he knows exactly his parameters. And yeah, I think that really kind of helped him as well, that there's a strong structure to it. But then within that structure, there's a lot of freedom. Yeah, and I think also maybe there's something to say about, I think Apollo character is in the beginning, he's waking up, something is off. He does not remember everything, or he's playing and he's trying to buy time actually until he can figure out what is going on. So there's a lot of kind of playing for time to see what is happening here, what is the truth, what is the setup.
Jaco, the film has a very distinct visual look. Um, I think you play a lot with the ideas of sort of claustrophobia, even though, it's a film about space. Uh, Talk about the visual image or the feeling that you were going for in the film and the idea of space and how you wanted to present that and your work with the cinematographer.
Obviously, there was a sense of claustrophobia and because of the space. I was very attracted to kind of more brutalist aesthetic than your typical kind of sci-fi world of metal and I don't know whatever it's kind of usually kind of seen in those worlds. I always wanted to have this kind of sense of claustrophobia, but then I have this feeling that there's this whole other dimension and world outside of this. There's some people are watching or in voyeuristic kind of feel to it. So although it's two people, I don't know if I always succeeded in it, but to have that sense that there's this other world, bigger world above and beyond this kind of confined space. We, in terms of me and Kruda, the DP, he did a lot of lens tests, and we actually shot with quite an array of different lenses. So sometimes really kind of wide, and these we would use intuitively depending on a certain scene or a certain area. So there's a plan there to kind of keep it visually interesting. We also shot anamorphic, for instance, with the flashbacks. To just give that a slightly different feel, and the ratio is also different. It just kind of distinguish those two kind of worlds. In a way, the flashbacks, the subjectivity to it. For instance, there's little Easter eggs of there's lots of objects actually in the spaceship crash that's there. That's almost like Apollo within this room is taking objects and putting it in his own flashback. So those kind of things were kind of conscious. Yeah, so that was kind of visual approach and that, but there was definitely a sense of claustrophobia, but then also that there is always something beyond that is kind of you trying to piece together what is that, and it's like maybe triggering the audience to kind of what is this? What is the setup? And obviously it gets revealed towards the end.
What was the decision about showing space and maybe the lack of showing space in just these kind of briefer moments? Talk about the thinking behind that.
I think it's just again that there is within this world there's this whole kind of other cosmic kind of space, and we're talking about the aliens. So I think it's kind of a conscious thing, or maybe subconscious, to kind of have this juxtaposition between, this confined space between two people, but then every now and then have this glimpse of the expanse of it all. So it just makes this kind of deal or kind of communication between two people, it just makes it so much more kind of, I guess, general, or a bit more grand, or kind of bigger within a bigger backdrop of space and time. So that was kind of there to keep on reminding the audience that there's something else behind this. The flashbacks, obviously, that's more on the spaceship. There's moments where we kind of show the space, and I really wanted to, at the end, to really, to have this grand kind of, Earth, and you just have this small kind of pop of the alien kind of breaking the atmosphere. Was always kind of an image I had in mind, to just kind of have that kind of juxtaposition between space and two people in the room. And I think that polarization, or kind of tension between these kind of different kind of spaces, hopefully keeps the audience guessing, and that push and pull between these two spaces, keep them, interested, or focused, or wondering what is out there. So that was kind of a conscious decision.
Drew, how did you feel about the look of the film? Is it kind of how you envisioned it when you started out on this project?
Again, like I watch a lot of science fiction, so for me, I've seen really good, and I've seen really bad, but it's never about comparison. It was always about, where does this film exist, and where does this story exist, and how can we service this story with a budget range that makes sense to where we're at. And again, I think when you think about it, or when we were talking about it, or even when we kind of had words on the page, I couldn't have really imagined being able to do certain things, because I don't have experience in that world. I can tell you what I like and I don't like, and I can tell you what I've seen, and I have, grand ideas, but I have not the slightest clue on how to execute it, as far as visually. So for me, it's a lot of, like, just get out of the way, I guess. We bring people on that you trust, and I think that's a lot of what movie making is like, you know, why we were so excited to have Jaco, and especially David Cruda as well, is there's a trust there that this is going to look, very stylized. This is going to look very individual in its own way. And again, when you're kind of, I've always said, I was like, anybody can kind of, at least in my opinion, if you give me $30 million, $50 million, I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? I'll go and I'll make a movie and I'll figure it out. But when the real artistry comes out is when somebody says, you don't have all this money to do that. How do we make this work, and how do we make it look visually stunning? That's the thing that kind of blows me away about all of this. And so, no, I didn't really have an idea on what I wanted it to look like. It was more the people that I wanted it to be worked on by, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride when it comes to that. And I can tell you, though, that the first time I saw some of the shots and some of the dailies and some of the stills that, even from day one or two or whatever of production, I remember being like, oh, we're good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're good. There was a real confidence. I mean, Sunil and I had so many conversations about that. So yeah, I get out of the way. I get out of the way, man. And I say, I let them do their thing. And I think it came out even more visually just beautiful and unique and individual in its own way than I probably could have imagined if you asked me this question, in 2000, 23 or whatever. So
Jaco, let's talk a bit about the political resonances of the film. I mean, I imagine you were shooting it before this immediate moment that we're in with AI and all of the stuff that the ideas of truth and reality are even more, complicated than probably even a year or two ago. Um, Talk to me a little bit about what you saw as the sort of the political tone of the film and, what it's trying to say with respect to those ideas.
I mean, I think I saw it, said it in a different interview as well. It's just, at the moment, and I think, like you said, we did this kind of before the whole AI boom, but there's no absolute truth anymore. It's just subjectivity. So I find that interesting about what we made because it totally plays on that ideas without rubbing it in your face. Um, I mean, I come from South Africa. We have like, was it 11 now? It's 12 official languages.
Mm.
So, and one of them is sign language. And, just like in a simple way, there was something about that I wanted to bring in and the way he kind of plays or interacts with the machine that kind of almost kind of plays to that kind of signage of a language or kind of hinting towards it. Um, Politically, it was always, I think in the beginning it was, Drew helped me, it was more America versus Russia. And I felt I wanted to make it something more like BRICS. I don't know if you know what BRICS is. It's kind of a group of the, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa. So it's like that kind of conglomerate. I felt more interesting to have this kind of very kind of felt to me a little bit outdated, which is now prevalent again. It's just how fast stuff is changing about, America versus Russia, etc. So I wanted to have that kind of a conglomerate of people. I also wanted to move it away from a specific country. I think initially it was in Russia. I wanted to take it to the highest point in the Arctic in Svalbard, which kind of had this very strong Russian influence as well as other countries. It's in this day and age also where it becomes symbolism, or the alien becomes symbolism for rare earth minerals in a way that people fight. There's no right and wrong. It's just, it's a race to get it first, or to, in this case, trying to weaponize it. And I think in a way one thinks, and it maybe is that Jim is working for the other side. But is he doing that, or is he kind of manipulated with his interaction and his belief of Apollo, and then him standing in front of this sentient being? Is there something that changes his mind, and in a way that they have the same kind of outcome, or at the end? I find that interesting. Is there a moment is he convinced by, or kind of manipulated by, subconsciously by Apollo and his belief and the pureness of language and communication? Or is it this moment when he stands in front of this sentient being? Or is it from the beginning that he was playing a double game? I really like those kind of layers as well. Talking and communication, and I guess language, and misinterpretation of language, and how you can, where language in a way becomes a weapon. And yes, truth. There's no absolute truth anymore. And
narrative too, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
interesting.
exactly.
It's interesting to watch the struggle, the power. I mean, power and control are so interesting to kind of like dive into, because it's who controls the narrative, right? If it's almost like if you get there first, you get to tell the story. And I've always kind of found that really really interesting with power and control, especially in like the political landscape that we're in today. It's like, trust me, just trust me, okay? You know what I mean? And that's a lot of where we're at. But it goes back to what we're saying is like, okay, like, why, like, I trust you just because, or is that because you're the honest one and they're not, or he's not, or she's not, or whatever. Um, and so I think, a lot of it is discernment as well. It's like it's it's kind of finding your own truth, and doing your own research, and going off of. I always Somebody said that the greatest currency in the world is how you make people feel, and they always remember how you made them feel, or how they left when you felt, or how they felt when you were around, or how, all these things. They may not remember what you said specifically when you meet somebody, but they remember how they felt. And I don't know. It's interesting with today, where we're at as far as, the narrative, and who controls that, and it feels like who gets there first.
And I guess also, I mean, we shouldn't forget that the alien he's not so interested in actual kind of ABC language, in that he almost kind of vibrates on a different kind of frequency, and he can tell if you are lying or not. So in a way, in this current day and age, that's a huge asset as well, to kind of sift through the bullshit and what's true or false, because it goes on to a different vibration, call it love or feeling or whatever. So there's also that side to it.
I mean, we even say, I think, we say in the movie, feelings are candid. They do not lie. And so there's something interesting about that as well. Like, with the being that can sense those things. And like Jaco said, it operates on a sensory level, and it's not manipulated by the words that come out.
And I guess that's also what was said there at the end. If you, what you tell Jim, what's the line, Drew? If he felt that, if the alien
Oh
felt,
yeah.
or not he, I don't know what she, that you were
Like I think, like,
untruthful, then
yeah.
it would have kind of blown you to pieces. But somehow
Yeah.
it sensed that there's a deep-seated thing that the both of you have kind of the same vibration or sense of, if he was kind of really malicious, I guess the entity would have kind of destroyed him. So there's that as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting too. Like when you watch, I think the one that made me think about it the most was like the recent Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. It's like you watch that movie, and for some reason, you're rooting for him. You feel for him. You feel for the decisions he's had to make, and the things he's had to go through, and all these things. But then you watch Batman, right? And you're like, oh, you're rooting for Batman. You know what I mean? And so there's this like push and pull, but it's really just perspective. And so it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, is that like the alien sees, he can sense the depth beneath it, and what intention is, and intentionality is kind of, is, I guess, paramount.
It's, there's also what it, in a very kind of blunt, very broad stroke, is like, what is it to be human, as well as kind of questions that we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Drew, were you surprised? I mean, you saw the concept from the beginning to the end, um, of how like resonant this concept became, or uh, more of such a live question over the course of filming this and to the point where now it's being released. Uh, to talk about that, about how the concept evolved for you, as you were doing the project, and now, as it goes out into the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, like I said before, I've always been kind of just curious about these things. Like these are things that in my personal life, I have, existential talks, over a drink with friends of mine and stuff. And it's it's just fascinating because, especially, you talk post pandemic and all this stuff, and how it was one thing and then it was another, and then there's so much coming at you from all different ways. I remember feeling really inundated by that and being like overwhelmed. And I always had this, like, as I was younger, I felt like I had this deep desire to like know, and just like have more knowledge and just understand more things. And so I threw myself into certain things, or I would start researching and reading all these things. And it's weird because they say the more you know, the less you know. And so I got to a point where I think I was like, you don't even know, like, you don't even know what you're taking in. is it factual and who's saying it and all these things. So it got very overwhelming. And so the idea was like very simple in that it was very simple in that like Jaco said, like there's just no seemingly no objective truth. Was there ever? Is it now that it's different? Is social media and the internet playing a part in that? Is it political? Who would understand the barriers of truth and communication like most? And we were just kind of like, well, somebody who would study language would obviously have a leg up on um, other people because they can understand double speak and all these things. They can kind of pick up on multiple languages. And you look at you can YouTube these people that can speak 30 different languages, and the weird part is they're fluent, and it's quick. They can switch in and out just like that. And I always was like fascinated by it's almost like a superpower in a way that us normal people just don't have. And so I think it started off as something very, very simple, and like maybe someone who studied language, a linguist, would have a leg up in that communication barrier, and how deep is the communication barrier when it comes to being honest and being truthful. But I think as we made it, as we made the story, and even physical production to where we're at today, so much has kind of changed and shifted, and in the world, and even in our movie, that like there's just so much you can kind of take from it. I think Jaco said
And if you
it's a
take it,
human
it's
story.
it's a year and a half. Eh? It's a period of basically a year and a half of when we shot it, but till now. So it just
Yeah,
shows you how fast things are
yeah.
are moving. Yeah.
So finally, for both of you, let's start with you, Jaco. What's the takeaway? What do you want the audience to get from the film?
I guess all these things that we are talking about, that they walk out of it and kind of who was lying when, or where does the deception turn, and where does the tables turn, and did he know from the beginning? I think it's all those kind of things that you work a lot and you think about it and try and have them, and not tie every kind of idea in a neat little package, but kind of leave these kind of questions. Uh, in a way, I made certain decisions of what they are, but in such a way that it provokes, hopefully, a discussion with people, uh, and even maybe, hopefully, that they would want to watch it a second time to really kind of try and figure out this whole kind of jigsaw puzzle. Like I said before, which is very kind of cardinal at the moment for me. It's what is truth? Is there an absolute truth, or is it just subjective? Um, Hopefully entertained as well. Yeah, I would stop there. Otherwise, I will just ramble.
Jaco, thank you so much for your
Pleasure.
time.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you
great stuff.
for really. We were both like an hour, really. But it's actually great to just kind of sit with stuff and kind of really sit in these questions and kind of try and make sense of them. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for watching the uInterview channel. With over 3,000 original celebrity videos, we have one of the largest collections of celebrity interviews anywhere. So remember to like and comment on our videos and subscribe to the channel. If you want to get more involved, you can become a member of the channel. Membership has its perks. You can see exclusive celebrity videos and get the opportunity to ask our celebrity guests questions. We can't wait to hear from you.